Welcome to Global Tax Talks, Tax in 60 Seconds. I'm Will Morris. And today I want to look at Pillar 2 in the side-by-side agreement, but not the technicalities nor the implementation, but more at how the presence or reality of side-by-side is affecting how countries are now viewing Pillar 2, both those countries that have and those countries that haven't adopted it. So let's start in Europe, where last week Italy's Deputy Economy Minister Maurizio Leo was pretty candid. Rome, he said, is still trying to figure out how to deal with the OECD's January side-by-side guidance. In relation to that January agreement, Leo flagged 4 big problem areas that the Italian government is considering as part of implementation. First, basic compatibility, how the side-by-side system lines up with the globe rules, and how multinational groups are meant to be treated depending on where they're headquartered. Second, what to do about countries that don't adopt Pillar 2 at all, but still have corporate tax rates that are, in substance, high enough. And that's where Brazil and India come in. Brazil, Leo said, with its quite tough tax system, will likely explore ways to stay outside the global minimum tax framework altogether. And India doesn't apply the globe rules, but it does maintain what he described as a substantially equivalent effective tax rate. So the question becomes, if Pillar 2 is supposed to be about outcomes, a 15% effective tax rate, does it really make sense to penalize groups just because a country hasn't adopted the OECD rulebook word for word? A third issue Italy is looking at is tax incentives. Which credits count? Which ones don't? How do substance-based tax incentives fit into the ETR calculation? And finally, simplification, or rather, lack of it. Leo hinted that even with existing transitional safe harbors, more temporary or even permanent relief may be unavoidable. Move away from Europe and the political picture gets even more complicated. A new brief from the South Centre, a policy institute for developing countries, pulls no punches. According to the brief, the OECD's 2-pillar tax reform project is running into real political trouble, and developing countries should be very cautious before signing up. The brief argues that Pillars 1 and 2 were largely designed by developed countries to serve their own interests, limiting multinationals' ability to move production into developing countries under Pillar 2, and constraining how much profit those countries can tax under Pillar 1. From that perspective, the reforms were never really about boosting developing country revenues in the first place. These concerns are becoming sharper as the project faces growing US opposition, rising skepticism in Europe, limited uptake across the developing world, and, perhaps most importantly, competition from the proposed UN Framework Convention. Against that backdrop, the brief says, the OECD has stepped up pressure on developing countries to adopt Pillar 2, presenting the January side-by-side package as a breakthrough that will unlock broader implementation. But, the South Centre cautions, this win comes with strings attached, including that exemption for US parented groups and features that tilt the playing field towards developed economies, and urges developing countries to resist political pressure, slow things down, and seriously consider whether simpler and more effective alternatives might better serve their interests. And finally, there are revenue impacts of side-by-side, which also may make Pillar 2 less attractive. Expect to hear more about the UK's Office for Budget Responsibility revised estimate released last week that reduced the UK's take from Pillar 2 to 1.6 billion a year from 2.8 billion projected previously, which includes 700 million attributed to the side-by-side agreement. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and come back next time so that you stay global tax ready.